Hello, back-to-back episodes today. Today we have a Tekken Tips as well. The Tekken Tips we're going over today is, in my opinion, a fundamental skill of Tekken that I don't think anyone teaches you, and I don't think you really get exposed to until pretty late in most people's Tekken careers. And that is the concept of if something is working, it is on your opponent to make you stop doing that thing. So, for example, I'm sure a lot of you guys have favorite things to do at the beginning of the round. Now, of course, in your first time up against someone, a backdash or a Korean backdash is probably almost objectively, almost always the best thing to do because you never know what your opponent might throw out. But let's say you understand your opponent's not going to press a button and they're not really going to backdash, they're just going to hold back, right? I am going to give an example of Law. So Law is down 4-3, is the low high move, 15 frames, and unless you have a full deep backdash or a side, even it has pretty good tracking. So the main way to get out of it at the start of a round is a full deep backdash, or of course a slower move or a low crush move. I will often start rounds with down 4-3. And I will do that at the start of every round until my opponent does something about it. And it has gotten me so much free damage. And before I did that, before I picked up on, my opponent really has to make me change what I'm doing. Because if what I'm doing is working, why should I change it until my opponent adapts? What I used to do was I would do down 4-3 the first two rounds, but then I would be like, he caught on, or she caught on, or they caught on, and they're gonna do a hop kick. So I'm just gonna hold back, or I'm just gonna backdash. And what do they do? Sometimes they do the exact same thing as before, and I could have hit it down 4-3. Because to you, the mind games you're playing with your opponent might be obvious because you play the character. Oh, this wave dash mix up that I'm doing, or I'm actually doing a wave dash, hell sweep, wave dash while standing 4 mix up to try and stay safe. Oh, this is really obvious to me, and while standing 4 is really safe, and they're going to be like really respectful. But let's say they're not being respectful, and your while standing 4 just keeps hitting because it's too fast for what they're doing. There's no reason to stop and be all like, oh, this time he's going to step my wall standing 4, or this time he's going to parry my wall standing 4, or do jabs to get me out of it. Just keep going because they have to prove to you that they understand the mind game you're playing. Until they prove to you that they understand the mind game that you're playing, essentially what you're doing is you're just exploiting the source of free damage. Another thing is on plus frames, right? A lot of times on plus frames on block, you'll be like, okay, I'm going to do plus frames. Let's say Brian. Brian's going to do back 1, he's on plus frames, and then he's going to do hatchet, right? There's a lot of ways to get out of that. You can interrupt it, you can step it. But let's say you just keep getting hit. You just keep taking that low. Then you don't understand the mind game. And there is no mind game from your point of view, or from either player's point of view. From the Bryant's player's point of view, this isn't a mind game. This is just a way to get free damage. And from your point of view, you're minus on block and you just have to take that. But the second you interrupt with a jab, then you initiate a mind game. Then you initiate a puzzle or a challenge for the Brian player saying, oh, okay, maybe I'll go in with the down forward 2 next time. Maybe I'll try and backdash to bait out a jab and then whiff punish with my own jab. But until you prove to them that you understand the mind game, then they'll just keep doing this. And note that this is not the same as someone not understanding a gimmick in terms of matchup knowledge. It might be the same, but the reason why I want to distinguish it is because in a gimmick where let's say you don't know about can opener, so you don't have the muscle memory to low parry Nina's can opener, then yeah, that's a free source of damage, and yeah, that's not really a mind game, but you're not probably not able to do much about it until you go to practice mode and get that muscle memory. Unless you have really good reactions and don't need to build that muscle memory to low parry that. Whereas in this case, you understand the situation, but you don't exactly understand that this is something a mind game can be extracted from, I guess, or built off of. This is something Jimmy J. Tran kind of tweeted about recently, where like if you're always respecting plus frames, you're like missing out on a large part of Tekken. And it's true. If you're always respecting plus frames, you're playing a very passive game and really a much more simple game. Part of what makes Tekken so complex is because if you're good enough in the matchup, or if you're even crazy enough, right? You don't have to be good enough. You can just be crazy. You can make every situation a mind game. Every situation can be something that the opponent has to worry about. And yes, the more these situations are made, the more you have to keep track of, which is easier to do on the offensive end, in my opinion. But also the more the opponent has to keep track of. So, for example, let's say, again, I'll use, who should I use in this example? I'll go back to Law, just because he's who I'm most experienced with. I can enter crouch dash from a pretty close range, and that can be a slide mix-up. That can be a slide mix-up. That's perfectly a viable thing to go for. Or I can enter crouch dash, stand up, and then forward dash in their face. So what is that doing? Okay, so when the opponent first sees the slide mix-up, and when I first apply it, okay, you know, it's created a guessing game. And that's pretty good. That's a good thing to be in an offensive situation, but it also becomes riskier as the attacker. Whereas the second I mix up the slide mix up with just a forward dash in their face, it creates another situation they have to deal with. Okay, so when I go into a slide mix up, they're like, okay, now they're either in a slide mix up or they're going to do an aggressive forward dash and try and get me to panic. So I just layered a mix up. And you might be saying, well, actually, just the down forward one or something can beat both those options, right? Oh, but then I break out the wall standing four in my slide mix up instead of like a bigger wall standing two or wall standing one, two, and then I'm getting counter hit launches. And you can really build up these layers and layers of mix ups. But until the opponent stops you or blocks that first slide mix up or punishes you for the slide mix up, then you've just identified a free source of damage. And once your opponent does show, okay, I understand that this is a mind game that I have to deal with, that's when you can introduce another layer onto the slide mix up in terms of maybe a forward dash or just a crouch dash into a back dash to try and whiff punish something. And you really open up not just the complexity of Tekken from a mechanical point of view, but a complexity from an exchange point of view with the opponent. What conversation are you having with your opponent? You kind of go from, a surface level, like small talk, if you will, like elevator talk conversation, to maybe you've been actually chatting with this person, all night, and you finally get to sit down one on one and have a nice deep conversation about this situation that you're putting them in. I know that's a weird analogy, but so yeah, just kind of remember until your opponent shows that they know that a mind game is going on, it's not a mind game. It's just a way for you to get an advantage in the match. And the second it becomes a mind game, that's when you can really start adding complexity to your offense. It also shows that you know that your opponent is ready and has had enough. But yeah, thanks for listening. Definitely try and incorporate this into your own game. Keep an eye out for these things, right? It might even be subconscious that like your, let's say your keep out move just always hits. It might be subconscious. Oh yeah, I just do that because it always hits. Well, then take advantage of that in a conscious fashion and really just keep doing it until they force you otherwise. So yeah, that's my advice. Thanks for listening. As always, Twitter will be in the description. Feel free to ask me any questions there. Peace out.